One of the cases that I think will always stick with me is Mr. Johnson and his child support case. It's been over a year since we picked up on the case and several years since it started, and it's still not over. I just got an update on the case within the past 2 weeks. I keep thinking it's going to end and then something else happens. But since it's been so long and a lot of you are new and may not have seen the whole entire thing, or you just forget things like me, let's go watch it again. Mr. Johnson's case started in the Lenawee County Circuit Court in front of Judge Olsaver. The original charge was failure to pay child support, and that was back in 2018. There were over 10 hearings on the case before we picked it up, when Mr. Johnson was a little bit difficult and in the dark, and kind of reminded us of a creepy guy in the white van. It probably wasn't appropriate, but that was the image that it conjured up with that whole setting that he was something else. So there was a proposed plea deal. They delayed his sentence on the failure to pay charge for 11 months, as long as he paid $100 a month minimum. All he had to do in this hearing was accept the plea deal. Do you think he can do that?
Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We are on the record then in the People of the State of Michigan versus Gregory Ernest Johnson. It's file number 21-20333-FH. Today's date set for a final pretrial conference in this matter. We are proceeding today by video conference. First, let me ask the attorneys to place their appearances on the record, beginning with Ms. Brenner.
Good morning, Your Honor. Sarah Brenner, Assistant Attorney General for the People.
Rhonda Underwood for Mr. Johnson this morning, Your Honor.
All right, and Ms. Underwood, where do we stand with the case today?
At this time, Your Honor, I believe Mr. Johnson will be pleading guilty on a delayed plea basis, Your Honor, to the 4-year child support case, Your Honor, with the provisions that the sentencing be put out 11 months if Mr. Johnson gets his arrearage down to 8,000. It's my understanding he gets an attempt, and if Mr. Johnson manages to pay the whole arrearage down in that time, Your Honor, then he would be eligible for a misdemeanor disorderly in this case, Your Honor. I believe that is, and I believe Mr. Johnson is to pay $100 a month, Your Honor. I believe that is the plea bargain that Mr. Johnson will be pleading to today.
Okay, Ms. Brenner, is that a complete and accurate statement of the agreement?
That's correct, Your Honor. He's to pay a minimum of $100 a month. He did not pay last month, so I do expect him to make up that missed payment as well.
I did pay.
The front of the court
Miss-
system is not showing
Miss
the payment at this time.
Underwood
So.
has the
Mr.
Miss
Johnson,
Underwood has
stop.
the receipt.
It's,
All right,
it's okay.
okay.
It's okay, Gregory.
We're not going to argue about this on the record right now. If the payment was made,
I will send Ms. Brenner the proof I have.
Okay, that's fine.
Mr.
I just
Johnson.
don't see it in the front of the court system yet.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. But that is the plea you're taking this morning, correct?
Yes.
Thank
we
you.
can't see you anymore, Mr. Johnson. There you are.
all right, Mr. Johnson, would you raise your right hand, please? Can't see you now, so if you have your right hand raised, please let me know when you have it raised.
Yes, it's raised.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I suppose.
I need a yes or a no.
Yes.
You are Gregory Ernest Johnson, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, you heard the statement of your attorney and the prosecuting attorney. Is it your intention to plead guilty today to count 1, failing to pay child support?
Yes, I accept the plea.
Is it your intention to plead guilty today?
Yes, I accept the plea.
Are you satisfied with Ms. Underwood and the advice that she's given you?
I suppose.
Do you understand that the maximum penalty for this offense is up to 4 years in prison and or a $2,000 fine?
Yeah,
Neither the prosecutor, defendant, or anyone acting on the defendant's behalf has discussed a possible sentence with the court, other than as we've discussed it on the record here this morning. Is that correct, Ms. Brenner?
That's correct, Your Honor.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Is that also your understanding, Mr. Johnson?
I don't know. I didn't understand the question.
Other than as we've discussed on the record here today, no one has discussed a possible sentence with me. Do you agree with that?
With me, right, okay.
No, with me. No one has discussed a sentence with me, other than as we've discussed on the record here today. Not Ms. Brenner, not Ms. Underwood, and not yourself. Is that right?
Right,
If a guilty plea is accepted, there'll be no trial. That means you're giving up the rights that you would have had at trial. I'm going to explain those rights to you now to make sure that you understand them. You do have the right to a speedy. Mr. Johnson, if you're going to interrupt me, I'm going to hold you in contempt.
I'm sorry.
This is not a funny matter. You have the right to a speedy public trial by jury. You can ask for a non-jury trial, and if the prosecutor and the court agreed, you could have a non-jury trial. You have the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You have the right to have the prosecuting attorney prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you're guilty, and you do not have to prove anything. You have the right to be present at trial, have the witnesses against you appear at your trial, and to ask those witnesses questions. You have the right to have the court order any witnesses that you have for your defense to appear at your trial. You have the right to remain silent during your trial and not have that silence used against you. However, you also have the right to testify at your trial if you wanted to testify. You understand, Mr. Johnson, that if your plea is accepted, you may be giving up the right to appeal issues that would otherwise be appealable if you were convicted at a trial.
Yeah,
Do you also understand that any appeal from the conviction and sentence pursuant to this plea would be by application for leave to appeal and not by right?
I didn't understand that.
Do you understand that any appeal that you might make from this conviction and sentence would have to be by application for leave to appeal and not by right?
Okay,
If you are not a citizen of the United States of America, conviction of a crime can result in deportation, exclusion from admission to the United States of America, or denial of naturalization. Do you have any questions about any of those rights?
He's muted now.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't mean to mute. I don't know how I muted. How did I mute?
Weird.
Do you have any questions about any of those
Weird.
rights, Mr. Johnson?
Crap.
You're unmuted now, Mr. Johnson.
I'm up to get, I'm not, I shouldn't be. I'm not on my headset though.
We can't hear you.
Well, I'm trying.
We can hear you. We hear you.
Oh, okay, well.
Mr. Johnson, do you have any questions about any of the rights that I've explained to you? Do
No,
you understand that you're giving those rights up?
yeah,
How do you wish to plead to the charge that on or about September 1st, 2018 through September 30, 2019, in the city of Adrian, County of Lenawee, that you did commit the offense of failing to pay child support?
I accept the plea.
If you want to plead guilty, you need to say guilty.
You want me to say guilty? Okay, fine.
If you want to plead guilty to this offense, then you need to say that you plead guilty.
I accept the plea.
That's not,
Mr.
that's not a
Johnson,
guilty plea. So if that's all you're going to say, Mr. Johnson, then I'm going to continue your not guilty plea and we'll proceed to trial on January 25th.
I never entered a not guilty plea.
Yes, you
Mr.
did.
Johnson, there are two pleas available, guilty or not guilty. Which do you choose today? Guilty or not guilty?
They want the not guilty or the guilty, so that's
Well,
fine.
no, Mr. Johnson, it's a matter of what you want to do today. Do you want to plead
No,
guilty
it's
or
not a
not
matter of
guilty?
what I want to do. Shit.
Mr. Johnson, are you going to plead guilty today or not?
Yes, that's acceptable.
If you want to plead guilty, you need to say that you're pleading guilty.
Yes.
Your audio was not clear. What did you just say?
Yes.
All right. This is the last time I'm going to explain this to you. And otherwise, we're just going to leave the trial set. How do you wish to plead to the charge that you failed to pay child support?
Well, you determined that I was guilty, so yes, I am guilty.
Sir, the elements of the crime are you were ordered to pay child support and you failed to pay for whatever
My
reason.
income did not support that.
That
The
doesn't
judge
matter.
knows that.
That doesn't matter.
Well,
The-
he found me guilty, so that's where
He
it
didn't
is.
find you guilty. He's
Yes, he
asking,
did.
were you ordered to pay child support and did you fail to pay it? It's either yes or no. If it's a yes,
did
then
not.
you plead
My
guilty.
income did not support the child support.
Judge, let's just leave it on for trial.
No, I want the deal.
Then you need to
Well,
admit what you did.
Mr. Johnson,
Mr.
you can't-
Mr. Johnson,
Ms. Underwood,
You are
please allow me,
Mr.
Ms. Underwood.
Johnson, Mr. Johnson, you are
Yes.
confusing the issue. The judge found that the child support was appropriately set, okay? He
Which it
found you
was
could not
but
go
that's
back.
fine.
That is a
I
separate
get that.
issue
Okay.
than the criminal issue we have today. Now, did you pay that child support or not? If you did not, then you need to say
I
the
was
word
unable.
guilty.
No, I did not. Okay.
So is that a guilty?
We're not going further with this. The record is already not satisfactory.
I'm
for
guilty
me
of
to-
the circumstances that set this thing.
Mr. Johnson, please do not interrupt me. If you interrupt me again, I'm going to hold you in contempt and I'm going to give you 30 days in the Lenawee County Jail. All right. I do not believe that the record created in this case today to this point would appropriately allow me to accept a guilty plea. Mr. Johnson has not indicated.
Yes, guilty.
Mr. Johnson has not indicated a clear intent to plead guilty and admit to the facts that would support a guilty plea in this case. Trial is scheduled for January 25th at 9 a.m. If I don't already have proposed voir dire questions and jury instructions, I'd like those submitted by Friday.
Yes, Your Honor.
And we will proceed to trial on January 25th. There is a plea agreement deadline on January 23rd. So assuming that Ms. Brenner is willing to leave that agreement open, I will accept a plea up until that point. If Mr. Johnson decides that he wants to unequivocally admit his guilt.
Guilty. I plead guilty.
I've made my decision for today. If
I
Ms.
plead
Underwood,
guilty.
Ms.
Do you want
Underwood,
to
if
set a
Mr.
time for January 23rd, Judge? That we could check back in or not?
I plead guilty today.
Mr. Johnson, I've already explained to you that you have behaved today in a way that I am not going to accept a guilty plea from you based on what you've said on the record here today. If you decide that you want to make a guilty plea, I would ask you to contact Ms. Underwood, have her arrange a time either tomorrow, Friday, or Monday to enter that plea. And if you show up and you answer the questions,
Do it.
Mr. Johnson, I've said it, this is the last time I'm saying it for you. If you interrupt me one more time, I'm going to hold you in contempt and sentence you to 30 days in the Lenawee County Jail. I am done. I've instructed you now as to how you can proceed if you want to enter a guilty plea. Contact Ms. Underwood. She'll make arrangements with my office. This hearing is concluded. Please log out.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
They had to reschedule the hearing for several days later, which wasn't shown anywhere online. However, it was reported that Mr. Johnson did finally accept the plea deal. It was a colossal waste of everyone's time, and him just being difficult for absolutely no reason other than to be difficult because everyone was doing this to help him. The conditions of the plea deal were he pled guilty, and it was suspended for 11 months. As long as he paid the $100 a month, it would continue. If after the 11 months he was able to get the balance under $8,000, which I don't know what the starting balance was, but it was obviously more than $8,000, the conviction would be reduced to attempted. I'm assuming that's attempted failure to pay child support. I'm not really sure even how that works. If he was able to get the balance down to 0 in 11 months, then the charge would be reduced to a misdemeanor. So there's no scenario where Mr. Johnson can completely get out of any kind of charge in this case. I imagine that's because his balance was so high and he's not exactly been pleasant. This is a hearing that occurred several months later.
We are here today for a sentencing hearing. We are proceeding today by video conference. Can I first ask the attorneys to place their appearances on the record, beginning with Ms. Brenner?
Good morning, Your Honor. Sarah Brenner, Assistant Attorney General for the People.
Rhonda Underwood for Mr. Johnson this morning, Your Honor.
And it's my understanding that we had today set as more of a check-in date to determine whether Mr. Johnson was making payments and whether to delay the sentence. Is that accurate, Ms. Brenner?
No, Your Honor, he had been already placed on the delay of sentence and he has not been complying with the terms. So I had asked to accelerate the sentence date to this date. He had been set for sentencing at December of this year. And I asked to move it up because he's failed to make his $100 a month payments and he's also failed to comply with probation.
Your Honor, I've spoken with Mr. Johnson both yesterday and this morning. Mr. Johnson's had some health issues, but that's no excuse. He understands he has to meet with the probation department and get the pre-sentence done, Your Honor, and he will do that. He also understands, and I've reiterated to him, that he can't wait on payments. He needs to make the $100 a month payment. I would ask the court, a pre-sentence needs to be done. I would ask the court to allow Mr. Johnson to come in next week and get his packet and get that done. And then we'll set a sentencing date and Mr. Johnson can be sentenced at that time.
And Your Honor, he pled in January. I made crystal clear on the record at that time that he had to be making $100 a month payments. He confirmed he understood. He's failed to comply with probation and preparing the PSI. So I'm going to ask for him to be remanded to custody so that the PSI can be prepared at this time.
Your Honor, I would hope the court would allow Mr. Johnson until next week to get into the probation department and get this done. He has been trying to get back to work, Your Honor. I would hope we can give him till next week to get in and get this done so we can get things back on the right track.
Your Honor, do you have the update from probation?
I do not have an update from probation. So
They prepared an update in January stating that they had tried to contact Mr. Johnson to complete the pre-sentence. And Mr. Johnson texted back stating, "This is Gregory Johnson. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but I have been sick this past week." They texted him back saying, "We need to make arrangements for you to come to the courthouse for an interview." He responded, "No, I'm in Jackson, Mississippi, trying to earn the $12,000 that Michigan wants." The agent then responded saying, "When would you be available to complete the interview?" And he failed to respond. So
here's what I'm going to set this over for 1 week for Mr. Johnson to come to the courthouse, pick up his PSI packet and fill it out and do his interview with the probation officer. I'm going to set the actual sentencing date for May 12th. Assuming
What
Mr.
date is
Johnson-
that, Your Honor? I'm sorry.
May 12th at 8:15.
May 12th. Thank you.
I'm going to set next week, April 13th at 8:15 for a status conference date.
Thank
If
you.
Mr. Johnson has not come to the courthouse and picked up his packet of information from the probation office and done everything he needs to do to comply with getting the pre-sentence investigation report prepared, I will revoke his bond and remand him to custody so that that can be done at that time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
thank you, Your Honor.
So the next date is April 13th, a week from today at 8:15.
So, as part of his original sentence, Mr. Johnson was supposed to go check in with the probation department and get everything set up. When you have a delayed sentence, you're essentially on probation because they're keeping track of what you're doing to make sure you don't screw up. Because if you screw up, then you're going to have that sentence revoked and you're going to have a more, whatever the original sentence was, or a harsher penalty put on you. Even if you don't have to report to probation, they are still overseeing you and have you on a watch list or whatever you want to say. And because he was making payments, probation is monitoring those payments to make sure that they're made, because if they're not made, you're in violation of that sentence and you're going to get in trouble. So he was supposed to go right after the last hearing, which was several months ago. Several months later, he still had not gone, and they tried contacting him, and he basically said, "Screw you." So judge wasn't very happy.
All right, Ms. Underwood, Mr. Johnson is here now. He is getting his audio connected. Are you going to need a breakout session, Mr. Johnson?
No, I do not, Your Honor.
All right.
Your Honor, just briefly before we go on.
Okay.
I've spoken with Mr. Schimpf and I've explained Mr. Johnson's circumstances and that he was current through March. He has had some slowdown with his employer.
Are you there, Ms. Underwood? Ms. Underwood is apparently having a connection issue. We'll give that a second to see if it resolves itself. All right, Ms. Underwood is here physically present in the courtroom at this point. Ms. Underwood, if you want to step to the podium.
I apologize. My battery ran.
No problem.
As I was saying, Your Honor, I've spoken with Mr. Schimpf about this, and with the court's permission, we would like this put out till the end of June for Mr. Johnson to get current, and if not, the sentencing would be accelerated at that point.
All right. Well, my understanding was that we were accelerating the sentencing because he was not current after pleading guilty. So, Mr.
Right.
Schimpf, is this something that you're in agreement with?
Yeah, he did come up with additional funds in March so that I believe he is only a couple of months behind. And I'm willing to extend this to the end of June with the understanding that he would become current at that time. And if not, then we proceed to the sentencing.
right, I don't see Mr. Johnson on the screen anymore. It looks like he turned his camera off. Mr. Johnson, are you there?
I'm here. I don't know what happened.
All right. Okay, so I will then adjourn this to June 29th at 8:15 a.m.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson, did you hear that? The adjournment is to June
Yes.
29th at 8:15 a.m. You will need to be logged back in at that time.
Okay.
All right, so you are all set for today, then you can go ahead and log out.
Thank you, Your Honor,
Thank you, Your
Thank you.
Honor.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
and thank the court for its patience.
Okay, so you heard in that hearing that they were rescheduling it for June. But at the June hearing, somebody forgot to send the notice. Nobody showed up. They had to reschedule. There was no penalty for that. It was a clerical error, no problem. It was rescheduled for August. Now, at the August hearing, Mr. Johnson failed to appear. A $10,000 bench warrant was issued. But then he showed up late. The bench warrant was canceled, but the prosecutor had already left, so they rescheduled it for September. When the September hearing came, Mr. Johnson was caught up on all his payments. So they adjourned it to allow him to continue making payments as originally planned. They adjourned it to December, and at that hearing, Mr. Johnson failed to appear. He later called the public defender's office and said he was in the hospital. He never provided any information, documentation proving he was in the hospital, though. When the January hearing came, Mr. Johnson again failed to appear. A bench warrant was issued for $2,403.43 cash bond. I'm not sure if this was his remaining balance or not, but it's kind of an odd bond amount, so kind of seems like it. Mr. Johnson called and said he had had surgery and was moved to a medical facility for recovery. He was again ordered to provide documentation. ASAP, let's go, you got to prove this. That didn't happen. So a week later, his original bond of $3,000 was revoked, and the bench warrant stands. Stay out of Lenawee County, Mr. Johnson. You got a bench warrant hanging over your head. And it just doesn't end. Don't get behind on your child support. They'll put you in jail. For real, for real. For real. Hope Mr. Johnson's okay.